Hello watch enthusiasts. Now today I'd like to talk about a number of alternative luxury watches for under £5,000. And the reason for this is that a great deal of people usually approach me each month with regards to asking about more expensive timepieces under the £5,000 mark, which is normally a sort of a price range which I wouldn't venture towards just due to the fact that a great many of us can't afford to buy watches regularly at that price point, so I'd rather aim at the lower ones. But as a result of this demand, I thought it would be important to discuss this and to point out several watches which are different from the normal watches, such as the normal Omega Seamasters or Rolex Datejusts that people will go for in this price range, which offer, I think, something a little bit different and a little bit more interesting for the individual in terms of aesthetics and indeed functionality. However, before I begin the video, I would like to announce a new collaboration between myself and the social media platform for collectors, Snubs. I've used Snubs for quite a few months now as one of my major forms of social media, and I'll now be running my own group here called the Watch Guys. And this is a group for watch collectors to share their collections, discuss matters of horology with each other, and ask me any questions on wristwatches, new video themes or collection reviews, which I really will endeavour to respond to. Therefore, I've included a link down below, and I'd encourage you very much to join this group to enjoy what I think are some very, very beneficial features. Now, the first watch I'd like to talk about is quite an interesting one, and this is the Longines Heritage Diver 1967. And this is a watch which I feel offers an enormous amount, really, for the price at which it offers it, for £2,180. And this is a watch which effectively is a very accomplished diving chronograph, based on some of the more old-fashioned models in the Longines line, hence in their heritage range. But I do feel this actually offers a watch which is a truly competent dive watch, as well as being a rather luxurious product with really very beautiful finishing. And of course the watch that one has to really compare this watch to, because it's a chronograph in the £2,000 to £3,000 price range, is the Omega Speedmaster. And I must say I do think this watch, despite not having quite the historical prestige of the Omega Speedmaster, offers rather a lot more. So it has a 42mm fully polished case, which is very much in typical fashion of Longines, faceted very, very nicely along the top of the lugs, and does feature either a strap or a bracelet depending on what you'd rather wear the watch on. My personal favourite is the strap, but for those who enjoy a good bracelet, Longines do produce very high quality bracelets and pieces. But I feel it's the dial of this watch that offers really a wonderful aesthetic and build quality. We have this matte painted crosshair dial, which does allude to older models, but I feel does still look quite contemporary due to the fact that the style isn't aged in any way. It's kept very much a crisp white and slight creams, but there's no sort of forced vintage airs in this watch through the use of vintage lume, for instance. Of course, the detailing on the dial is also very, very beautiful, and I think fits very nicely within this 42mm case, and does create a very legible 300-metre diver, which this watch is. So we have this matte base, as I've said, with crosshairs, which are, I feel, very attractive and mirror the colour of that bezel, but I'll talk about the bezel in just a moment. And then we have this asymmetric style to the dial. We have the running seconds on the left-hand side, the chronograph minutes on the right, and the chronograph hours at the bottom. And I feel the way that they've coloured the subdials and given them this concentric pattern on them really does help to break up the dial and not make it look too cumbersome or clunky. Similarly, the hands are beautifully faceted and loomed, and match the very simple loom plots around the dial. And then, of course, we have this cream ring with a tachymeter, which again adds a degree of functionality to the watch as really an all-purpose sports watch with a very classical and I feel very well-considered vibe. Now, sitting atop this watch is a heavily domed, box-domed sapphire crystal, which gives wonderful reflections around the edge of the dial, and I feel makes this watch look all the more attractive in terms of giving it a softer aesthetic, which I think is rare and tends to be difficult to find, especially in this price point where brands tend to shy away from very large stylistic cues like this, especially in sports models. So it's nice to see Longines playing with the concept a little bit. Additionally, going along with that navigational aspect, as well as being a dive watch, one does have a unidirectional red-painted aluminium bezel insert, with as well as having the count-up minutes as you would have on a dive watch. It has a GMT-style hour function around it, so you can keep a second time zone, which adds a degree of practicality to this watch as a sort of an aviation timepiece with that tachymeter as well. So I do feel Longines have put a lot of care into this watch, along with that beautifully finished crown with the embossed Longines logo, which is of course their original logo and not any sort of modernised form of it. Now, beating behind that beautiful case back that Longines have produced for this watch, specifically for this watch in fact, which guarantees 300 metres of water resistance, we have the caliber L688 column wheel chronograph, and this is a movement which is an ETA movement, but it's made exclusively for Longines by ETA. This movement, it doesn't appear in anything else other than these Longines chronographs. And of course it does have the column wheel style of assembly, which I feel does add a great deal of value to the watch, especially when column wheel chronographs tend to cost more in general. So it really does show that Longines have put care into thought behind this watch, and also into the movement given to this timepiece rather than a simple ETA. Now the next watch I'd like to talk about is a model from Vulcain, or Vulcain, as some would pronounce it. And this is a very old brand with a wonderful heritage in terms of producing alarm watches. And the model in question here is the President's, which is more commonly known as the Cricket. And this is an interesting watch because it features an entirely in-house movement for the price of £3,500 or so, with really beautiful styling and detailing to produce a wonderful dress watch, which sits in a price bracket where it offers a great deal as far as an interesting timepiece goes, which isn't a very commonly known timepiece by many, but I feel offers quality comparable to other larger brands. Of course, the main aspects of this watch are that it's a 39mm dress watch with a beautifully polished case, which is by no means a very resilient case, which makes this watch very much a dress watch in its most true form, with a 50-metre water resistance, and indeed that alarm function, which I'll talk about in just a moment. But in terms of aesthetics, this watch is beautifully done with a wonderful sunburst dial in really a variety of colours, from blues to dark greys and also these light silvers. And one has of these applied indices which are very simple and minimalistic, but while retaining a certain charm. So there's no sort of Bauhaus minimalism here, but there's a degree of charm to this dress watch, which I feel isn't seen very commonly, I feel, in high-end dress watches that don't reach into the ultra-luxury section of things and sit around this price point. And of course one has very nicely beveled Dauphine-style hands, and of course that extra hand being the alarm hand, which of course sets off the 20-second alarm. Now, powering this rather beautiful watch is the Vulcain in-house V10 caliber, which is a hand-wound movement which can be wound in two directions, depending on whether you wind the spring barrel, which winds the timekeeping aspects of the watch, or the one which winds the alarm. And the alarm is quite loud, really, because of the resonating equipment in the caseback, along with that stylised V for Vulcain, which is also part of that assembly. And this is controlled via the pusher at the 2 o'clock position on the watch. And this, I think, adds a degree of practicality to the watch to be able to set a timer or an alarm, which makes this watch more of a piece that can allow you to time and organise your day as a businessman, or indeed as someone who simply needs to know or be alerted to a certain time. Similarly, the decorated movement is a real joy to behold, because it doesn't look really like anything else on the market, with very exposed bridges and so on, and also with some very nice decoration on various of the larger wheels on the caseback, which I think does add to the value of this watch as a talking piece as well as simply a functional item. And of course, when the vast majority of alarm watches have a closed caseback for the sake of the resonance and noise produced, here you can see the movement very clearly, which does show Vulcain's expertise in this field. Also, the warranty style of this watch is quite interesting, because after 2 years, if one takes it in for service, one gets another 2 years of warranty, which does show the attention to the customer given by Vulcain with regards to the longevity of these watches as easily serviced movements by the brand that certainly can be maintained for many, many years to come, which really does add value to this unique watch in a world where actually alarm watches are becoming less and less popular due to their complication, also their high price from brands like Tudor. So it's wonderful to see a brand producing something that's affordable considering the type of watch, and also beautifully made. Now, the next watch I'd like to talk about reaches towards the sort of market where someone wants a watch which is really functional for everything. And this is a very, very good all-rounder as far as watches go. And this is the new IWC Ingenieur 2017 with the 3 hands. And this is a watch which, in a sense, is very different to previous Ingenieur models. This watch moves away from absolute anti-magnetism and has a somewhat reduced anti-magnetic protection, I suppose, than on previous versions, in favour of a slimmer case. But the water resistance of this watch has been upped substantially to 120 metres, which makes this watch really the ultimate sports dress watch. And what you have here really is a watch with a very, very delicate style of proportions. We have this beautiful polished case, which seems very simple at first glance, but I think moves into that brushed and polished bracelet extremely well. And of course no longer has the the integrated bracelet seen on the Genta-inspired models, going towards the earlier models produced by the brand, the reference 666 of 1955, which had a more similar style to this watch. Now, in terms of dimensions of this watch, it's a 40mm timepiece with a thickness of only 10.3mm, which for a watch with 120 metres of water resistance is really rather impressive, I feel, and does show IWC's departure from a more dress-orientated watch towards a more robust timepiece for every day. And of course, with this pursuit, this watch does engage in the market of the Rolex Datejust, and I think takes it on extremely well and offers a wonderful alternative to this watch, which was for many years untouched as the only robust dress watch on the market, with a really timeless aesthetic. And I do feel that here, with the rather beautiful sunburst dials, whether you go for the silver dial or the dark grey style of dial with the bracelet, one's really getting a very versatile timepiece. And similarly, the hands with loom painted onto them, and also with the loomed indices, which are also beautifully faceted and polished, which are also applied to the dial, add a finesse to this watch, but with the loom a great deal of practicality to the watch as a timepiece to be worn very regularly and used in any occasion. And of course, the sporting credentials of this watch are tipped off really with that arrow second hand, which I think really does add a great deal of movement to the watch dial and prevents it from looking a little bit too old-fashioned. Now, one aspect of the watch which I feel is very much in keeping with the fact the watch is trying to be a versatile and functional dress watch with that beautiful bracelet is the movement. And the movement is what they call the caliber A35111, and this is effectively a fully decorated and modified Sellita SW300, which is, in fairness, the most high-end three-hand movement that Sellita make, and certainly is designed to take on the very best VTA. Though I do feel that I would have appreciated an in-house movement for this sort of price, though I do still think the watch offers a great deal of value considering the other options, and the fact that IWC finishing on the case and bracelet is always superb, and certainly does show a lot about the brand's care. And of course the bracelet, as I've said, is an interesting part of this watch because it's no longer integrated. It can be removed and replaced with a strap, as is the case on all models apart from the black dial version, which comes with the bracelet. And of course all the links are screwed, and one has the really fantastic quality in the clasp and so on, which I think has become typical of IWC bracelets. I think what I like most about this watch, though, is it takes the elegance of mid-century dress watches, but combines them with the care, quality, and also, I feel, modifications with regards to resilience that have taken place over the years following those, to produce a watch which I think sits extremely well between all of these different takes on the dress watch, to produce a timepiece which I think will appeal to the largest audience, and I think will become very, very popular in time, though of course this watch is new for this year. Now, the penultimate watch in this list is a watch which is very similar, one could say, to the IWC I just showed you. But I do feel that for an increased price of around £450, this Omega Seamaster offers a somewhat different package. This watch is the Aqua Terra, but the Aqua Terra 15,000 Gauss. And this is a watch which I feel is a very interesting and underrated model in the Omega lineup, and is one which is often neglected, but I think is probably one of the most versatile watches they make, in terms of being a resilient watch, but also one that one can wear on many occasions. And if anything, this is a much more resilient watch than the IWC, which is a watch for dress, but also for leisure, whereas this watch can quite literally be used for sport with no real concern. And whilst I feel the IWC really does compete with the likes of the Rolex Datejust, this watch does outdo those in a way, in that this watch features really an incredibly impressive movement. But before I get onto that, the case finishing on these watches is really superb, and is courtesy of the new generation really of Omega cases, which look very, very clean and modern, whilst looking fairly subdued really compared to other sports cases. And of course one has those crown guards which are effectively built into the asymmetrical design of the case, and with that increased size to the polished bevel on the right hand side of the case protecting the crown edges. And the build quality here is apparent when one looks, for instance, at the crown, which, whereas on other brands, when one screws in a screw-down crown, it doesn't always line up the same way, whereas with this watch it always lines up with the Omega symbol facing up, which is a sign, really, of the care they take when building these watches, and in terms of designing them and designing the crowns and crown tubes, something that seems superficial, but to Omega it really has been an aspect they wanted to consider. And of course the case features these types of twisted lugs with brushed and polished finishes, which I think show show the elegance of this watch, which is a slightly more subdued and downsized version of the classical 300-metre Seamaster, without the bezel, for instance. but it still is water resistant to 150 metres, and I would have no concern swimming with this watch, especially with the very, very well made bracelet that this watch comes on. Now, the dial of this watch is very, very beautifully made, with a very nice and elegant style of strakes going down the dial, which reflect light very nicely. And of course, this is highlighted by the black and yellow text around the edge of that second track, as well as the fact that it has that rather interesting striped second hand, which does show the technical aspect of this watch as being a little bit more than a dress watch, but not quite the fully fledged dive watch that the other models in the Seamaster lineup are. But of course, really, the main talking aspect of this watch is that movement. And this is the 8508 calibre of Omega automatic movement, which really does wipe the floor, I feel, with the vast majority of other movements at this price point. The quality of finishing and the quality in terms of features is really excellent to see here. One of the most immediately apparent aspects is the fact that when one adjusts the date, rather than adjusting the date in the normal way by simply changing the date using the first position of the crown, here one can adjust the hour hand independently, which allows one to change time zones without stopping the watch and losing accuracy, which is of course something these new coaxial chronometers pride themselves on. Additionally, these watches are very, very anti-magnetic, with silicon balance springs and generally non-iron based components, which of course allows the watch to be anti-magnetic to beyond 15,000 Gauss, without any sort of cage inside or soft iron core. Which means that you have a wonderful exhibition case back to be able to see the movement and its 60-hour power reserve with its coaxial escapement, which of course reduces friction over time and lengthens service intervals, and changes the likelihood of inaccuracies over the wear of this watch, which I feel makes this watch with its lume dial a really wonderful choice for someone who wants a watch for every purpose. Though, of course, it's perhaps not the most formal of watches, I feel that it could still pull off that kind of situation with really no cause for concern or problems. And of course, one does also have the date and a heavily loomed and very elegantly done dial, which allows one to use this watch really as a practical piece as well as a formal timepiece. Now, this final watch is really the opposite of that Omega. While the Omega is the forefront of mechanical technology in terms of making a resistant watch, this Jaeger LeCoultre couldn't be more traditional, from everything from its sector-style dial to those syringe hands, and even through to the exquisitely decorated but very, very traditional movement inside it. Now, this watch, released earlier this year, effectively celebrates the 25th anniversary of the Master Control, and this is the date version, which comes in at £4,800, which is at the very top limit, as you can tell from of this price point. But certainly I think you're getting a really wonderful watch and access to a brand which would not normally produce watches this beautifully made for that price point. And the watch is a 39mm by 8.5mm thick watch, so very reasonably sized and is all-round a dress piece, with minimal water resistance and that ultra-slim case, which I suppose isn't ultra-slim in terms of comparison to other ultra-slim watches, but certainly is much slimmer than a great deal of other watches, especially with such an intricately and beautifully decorated movement, in this case the in-house caliber 899/1, which has a really wonderful solid gold rotor, and is decorated exquisitely on all the bridges, and I think does show JLC's very classical attention to detail when it comes to the movements that they produce. In terms of colouring, though, this watch really is a very well unified timepiece, with effectively blacks, silvers, and those wonderful blues on the hands, and indeed the alligator leather strap, which I think matches the detailing on the dial and the date wheel extremely well. And of course those empty syringe hands, which I think resemble hands where the loom has fallen out over the years, but do so in a very, very subtle way, without giving too much of a vintage air, but while still paying homage to older watches. And of course this dial is extremely legible because, in fact, that sector dial is very easy to read due to the way that the indices are quite nicely spaced and lined up with the hands, so you have a separate track for the hour hand and indeed the minute hand. Also, you have numerals at 12, 6 and 9, as well as the date at 3, which is very well integrated into the general aesthetic of the watch. And the dial is delicately designed to have this brushed effect around the edge of the dial, and then a much finer style of finishing in the centre, giving a very sort of iridescent shine to this beautiful silver dial, which is very restrained, and I feel is accomplished extraordinarily well, and matches those hands extremely well. Similarly, the case is beautifully made, if very simply made, with a simple polished bezel, as well as bevels down the edge of the lugs, with those polished flat planes on the top of the lugs, and the brushed sides to the case, which again add a certain substance to the watch, and it doesn't seem that JLC is skimping at all on finishing, which is something a lot of brands can do, but certainly they are really producing a watch which I think will only appeal to some people. Most people would want a more versatile watch, but I think as far as a watch to wear every day, I can't think of a better option, as far as very simple three-hand and date watches go. Now, one detail about this watch which isn't terribly well known, but has been made pretty obvious by JLC, is that this watch, though not an official anniversary watch, will only be made for the rest of the year. And so as a result, it should be quite a rarity in future to be able to get hold of such a beautiful timepiece, with a minimalistic dial, but one which I feel has everything you might ever need from a watch, as well as the traditional JLC logo and name, and simply automatic and Swiss made on it, which is really all you want from this beautiful steel watch. And of course, this is the bottom end of the range, because there is also a chronograph and a geographic style of watch, also made by them, but those reach up into much higher price points, around the £8,000 price tag. So I feel you're getting a really wonderful watch with a beautiful calibre inside it. And let's not forget, this is the brand that made movements for both Audemars Piguet and also they did also make movements in the 1980s for Patek Philippe, which I think does present this brand as a really superb and very interesting brand as far as these watches go. Anyway, I'll conclude the video here, but thank you very much for watching, and please do leave your comments down below, or indeed join me on Snups to give me your comments and thoughts on this video. And also please do like, share and subscribe to help the channel and to enjoy more content here in future. So thank you very much for watching. This is I'm on the Watch Guy, over and out.